Hello all, this is Dr. Shaumili Mandal and I am in my last module, that is the 12th module, and in the last week of our 12-week long course. And in this, I'll be dealing with some discussions, some doubt clearings, some question answers regarding folk. And here I'll be giving you 5 lectures as I have done in the earlier lectures. The first one, my lecture 1, will deal with do we really care? Okay, means do we really care about the folk culture and the folklore? Lecture 2, we are the folk, means how we can take the folk studies further. Lecture 3, I'll be talking about recent trends in folklore studies. In Lecture 4, Know as you grow. And in Lecture 5, the references, sources and citations. I have given very catchy phrases, for my lectures, but I'll be dealing with very important factors and also the future of folklore studies. So now I'll be starting with my first lecture. Do we really care? And I'll be talking about the various aspects of how we really care about folklore or we do not care about folklore. Folk culture is a living, breathing example of human ingenuity and tenacity, not just a holdover from the past. Maintaining cultural diversity, encouraging a sense of community, and enhancing our common human experience all depends on its preservation. Global awareness of the significance of preserving intangible cultural heritage is demonstrated by initiatives and by institutions such as UNESCO and regional cultural centers. In the modern world, folk culture, which includes traditional arts, customs and practices, faces many obstacles. These issues are caused by a number of things such as commercialization, urbanization and globalization. So, first I will be talking about the cultural homogenization and globalization. Remember, due to globalization, dominant cultures have spread widely and frequently eclipses local customs. As local habits and practices are supplanted by international norms, a phenomenon known as cultural homogenization causes cultural variety to erode. Indigenous cultures are becoming less valued and practiced. For example, as Western fashion and fast food progressively is supplanting native clothing and cuisine. Also, the demise of folk culture has been happening, due to population migration from rural to urban areas. So, as people are moving from the country houses, you can say, or from the rural India, or in throughout the world to urban spaces looking for you can say jobs, more stability, lifestyle, education and healthcare, folk culture is gradually losing its root because it's very difficult to preserve your own culture, to stick to your own culture once you go in a culture which is more, glitz and glamour than your culture. Traditional customs and traditions are sometimes forgotten, as I said, and they are also abandoned as individuals relocate to urban areas. Cultural expressions have also become commodities as a result of the commodification of cultural heritage and for tourism and financial gain. Authenticity, interestingly, is lost when traditional crafts, performances and rituals are staged or modified to satisfy visitor expectations. For instance, tourist-oriented performances that might not faithfully capture the customs of the Maasai people have commodified the culture. We also have the reductionism, in transmission across generations. Folk culture must be passed on from one generation to the next in order to survive. Folk traditions are becoming less common in many nations, though as younger generations are less interested in picking up old knowledge and skills. Therefore, the survival of cultural heritage is in danger due to this lack of attention. There is also cultural identity, language loss, and death of a language in a folk culture. So, what happens, in this cultural loss and death of a language? It is said in the world, we have many languages. You can say hundreds of languages we have, maybe sometimes in thousands. But as we are getting less people to talk, in certain languages, the languages are becoming extinct. They are becoming obsolete. As a result, they are dying. Already in the world, many languages have died because they have not been preserved, because people are not interested anymore to talk to them, because we have the globalized languages which is taking the place of these traditional languages. Traditional knowledge is also eroded with the death of the language, and cultural identity is lost as a result of this linguistic shift. We also have the pressures from the economy and shifting lifestyle. The collapse of folk culture is significantly influenced by economic factors. Traditional crafts and methods have been replaced by mass produced, less expensive commodities. For instance, traditional silk weaving techniques have declined in Bihar, India as a result of the importation of silk yarn, which has impacted the livelihoods of women silk spinners. So, we can say that in attempt to maintain and revive traditional customs, the people's role is very crucial. And even though folk culture faces many obstacles in the contemporary society, the society should preserve their cultural history and foster diversity in a world growing more interconnected by appreciating the importance of folk culture and assisting with efforts to preserve it. Now, I will be talking about the negligence which the northeastern India faces, the folk culture actually. Globalization, urbanization, historical marginalization and shifting lifestyles have all contributed to the serious neglect of folk culture in Northeast India. Various communities in the area have seen their traditional identities, languages and customs erode as a result of these causes. For example, traditional musical instruments including the khong, the drum, the sialki, the mithun horn, the rosem pipe, flute and gongs are becoming less and less common in the Mar population. Most of these instruments have been supplanted by modern Korean and Western instruments. Traditional Mar music have been further marginalized by the younger generation's predilection for contemporary musical styles, which have reduced it to ceremonial occasions or museum displays rather than being a part of life. Also, the native languages of Northeast India are dwindling as a result of English and Hindi's dominance. You see, when we have, like some major languages and also, some languages in which people are more comfortable to speak to, the language of that region gradually dies out. For example, there is very few population who are talking in the language of the Mar tribe. Also, we have the growth of Assamese or Ohomia, which is actually sometimes taking over the other languages. Even Ohomia and other regional languages have been displaced by English, which is widely used in media and education in Assam. Literature, folklore and oral traditions that are essential to the area's cultural legacy have all been lost as a result of this change. The loss of cultural significance and commercialization is happening. To satisfy consumer demand, traditional crafts and textiles like Assamese silk saris are being mass produced more and more. These products frequently lose their authenticity and cultural relevance as a result of this commercialization. In a similar vein, Assamese cultural holidays like Bihu are losing ground to international festivities and entertainment, which is causing younger people to become less involved and enthusiastic. Indigenous religious practices have also eroded as a result, of the advent of Christianity. Previously, the tribes of, northeast had their own religion. They still have their own religion, but they used to follow their religion more. But due to the dominance of the Christian missionaries and education also with the benefits you get when you convert, right? Though I know it's a very sarcastic comment, but yes, it does happen. So when the advent happened of Christianity, the followers of traditional religion is actually dying out. For example, in reaction, efforts to resurrect and institutionalize traditional beliefs and practices have given rise to movements such as Doni Polyism. By supporting their ancestors' religious and customs, these initiatives seek to protect communities' cultural identities. Cultural integration is also a result of new cultural norms and practices brought about by the proliferation of international media. Traditional customs and traditions are eroding in states like Mizoram and Nagaland as a result of an increasing demand for Western lifestyles, including fashion and entertainment. The preservation of indigenous cultures and identities is threatened by this change. Also, indigenous traditions have become commodities as a result of Northeast India's growing tourism industry. Indigenous communities are frequently misrepresented and exploited by tourists who see them as unusual attractions. Indigenous people may lose their cultural and intellectual property rights as a result of this dynamic, which also may cause their cultural identities to erode. So we can say Northeast India's folk culture is being neglected in a number of ways, including the commercialization of cultural artifacts, the loss of indigenous music, languages and religious customs. Urbanization and globalization, have given us economic growth, but they have also affected a place, culture, interestingly the folk culture, and is a result for the erosion of the traditional language, the traditional culture, practices and everything, which is not only happening in Northeast India, but is happening throughout India. And that I will discuss in my next slide. So, now I will be talking about how due to colonial practices, historical neglect and current issues, East Indian folk culture, which includes rich customs of tribal and indigenous communities, have been systematically marginalized. For example, indigenous groups' cultural practices were disrupted during British colonial control when they were frequently uprooted from their native places. The languages, customs and artistic expressions that are essential to the area's cultural identity have been lost. In Jharkhand, the Santhal rebellion of 1855-56 was a reaction to the East India Company's exploitation and uprooting of the Santhal people. This uprising demonstrated the close relationship between culture, land and opposition to colonial rule. Following independence, the emphasis turned to growth and modernization, frequently ignoring indigenous cultural expressions and knowledge systems. So, folk traditions were devalued as a result of this change in favor of popular narratives. Also, indigenous languages and cultural traditions have frequently been marginalized by education policy. For instance, we have the educational system in many areas of Jharkhand, which were created to discourage the use of native languages. Also, the cultural identities and customs were eroded as a result of this linguistic transition. The continuation of some ceremonies is in also danger due to a shortage of skilled practitioners and competent speakers. For example, previously the performances we have, the folk performances, they had many practitioners. People were interested in them. But at one point of time, they were gradually dying out, and we might not know, many folk practices and performances have actually died out without leaving any trace. But the advent, of technology and this revivalistic instinct amongst people to revive. So, the revivalistic instinct of people and also to revive the folk culture of one's culture brought back these performances, brought back these folk performances. So now we have comparatively a larger number of people following the folk tradition, the folk performance, the folk music, the folk theatre. It might not be huge in number, but significantly more, which is helping it from, not becoming extinct. That much people are kind of interested presently. New values and lifestyles brought about by urbanization and globalization frequently clash with customs. For instance, traditional dances, music and dialects are dwindling in North Bengal as younger generations grow more estranged from their tribal heritage. Limited access to resources and chances to participate in traditional behaviors worsen this cultural transition. Throughout history, missionary endeavors have contributed to the transformation of native civilizations. Anthropologist Verrier Elwin observed in the 1950s that missionary work frequently upended indigenous societies, causing them to give up customs like weaving, dancing and music. The idea that Christian teachings were superior to indigenous beliefs and customs was the driving force behind these changes. As I said, that religious conversions and assimilations have also contributed in the erosion of folk culture. People are more interested in what new the religion is offering rather than sticking to their own religion. In national historiography, the contributions and viewpoints of indigenous populations have frequently been disregarded in national historiography. The issue was brought to light by President Pranab Mukherjee, who pointed out that colonial masters tutored history and is thought to be more accurate than local folklore. Indigenous cultural narratives have not been acknowledged or preserved as a result of this marginalization. So, East India's folk cultures have been severely hampered by urbanization, religious conversion, educational policies, historical neglect and the predominance of popular narratives. Promoting indigenous languages, recording oral traditions and incorporating indigenous viewpoints into national histories are all important components of a coordinated effort to maintain and revitalize these civilizations. Fostering a more diverse and inclusive cultural landscape requires acknowledging and appreciating the rich cultural legacy of East India's indigenous communities. Next, I will be talking about the carelessness we have in South India. As I said, that I will be dealing how folk culture has actually reduced in reference to throughout India. I have told you about how it is facing issues in Northeast India, in East India. Now I'll come to South India. Okay, and we can say that in the recent years, the folk culture of South India has also been neglected due to the rise of urbanization. Remember, urbanization, globalization are the major issues which are actually causing the folk culture to gradually diminish, and in some places it is becoming extinct. The Ati Kalenja folk dance tradition in Karnataka is in danger of dying out. This is one example. And this dance, which is customarily performed in front of homes during the month of Ati, features kids dressed as spirits dancing to the sounds of Paddana or Tulu folk music. However, younger generations are less likely to participate due to rising urbanization and educational constraints, which is causing the custom to gradually fade away. In a similar vein, other folk dance styles including Kavariyattam, Devarattam and Mailattam are in decline in Tamil Nadu. Once essential to local festivals, these dances are now eclipsed by contemporary educational institutions and urban entertainment possibilities. There is also the deterioration of knowledge and oral traditions in South India, as they are being less passed down. Due to the influence of contemporary schooling and electronic media, younger generations are not particularly interested in learning traditional dances, music or rituals. Important indigenous knowledge has been lost as a result of this cultural change. In a similar vein, maintaining oral traditions is difficult for the Komarpant community. Traditional melodies, storytelling and genealogy records are in danger of disappearing due to urban migration and shifting lifestyles. Through community workshops and digital media, efforts are being undertaken to document these customs. We also have the traditional handloom techniques in Kanchipuram, which is well known for weaving silk saris, but they are also dwindling. Low pay, inadequate infrastructure and competition from power looms are some of the factors that have caused this skill to decline. Traditional weaving is in danger of dying out as the younger generation moves away from it in search of better prospects. Sacred groves and village shrines, which were previously essential to folk worship customs, are vanishing in rural Tamil Nadu. As urbanization increases, these locations which are devoted to deities like Ayannar and Mariamman are being overlooked. Also, we have, the Tirupati temple, which is extremely famous in South India. But it has actually, profited during, religious commercialization, because we see a large number of devotees flock every day to the Tirupati temple, the Tirumalai temple actually in Tirupati. And they are having donations and huge you can say prasads being distributed, which is actually giving revenue to the temple trust and also to the state. But not necessarily that all the temples are gaining from the commercialization and the urbanization. Some are even dwindling, and those are the two names which I have given you, that the folk deities are gradually, being less noticed by the people of their own culture. Academic courses are also prioritizing above cultural education in South India's official education system. A generation has become less rooted in their cultural heritage. South India's disregard for traditional culture is a complex problem that is to be impacted by modernization, urbanization and shifting educational goals. To guarantee that the rich cultural legacy of South India is not lost to future generations, communities, governments and educational institutions must work together to preserve these customs. Now, I will be talking about the problems or the laxity in West India. Numerous cultural and socio-economic reasons have contributed to the slow demise of folk culture in Western India. The decline of customary dancing, music, crafts and communal rituals that were formerly prevalent in the area is indicative of this erosion. Over time, folk culture in the western Indian states of Maharashtra, Goa, Rajasthan, Daman and Diu, Gujarat and Dadra and Nagar Haveli have been severely neglected and declined. The decline of customary dancing, music, crafts, and communal rituals that were previously prevalent in many areas is indicative of this corrosion. In the past, the Kutch was home to many Kamangiri murals, actually Kamangiri art, that portrayed events from the regional myths. However, many masterpieces were lost as a result of the earthquake in 2001. These pieces of art are now only found in a few locations, such as the Tera Fort and the McMurdo Bungalow. As contemporary entertainment becomes popular, Gujarat's traditional folk theatre, Bhavai, is actually becoming extinct. But we have Garba, which is becoming more popular and spreading throughout the world. So, as Bhavai is not benefiting from commercialization, on the other hand, Garba is actually benefiting from urbanization and globalization. So, we have the advantages and disadvantages of the aspects of the new society, we can say. Also, tribal dances including Tarpa, Bhavara, Dol, Tur and Thali are an essential part of the cultural fabric of Dadra and Nagar Haveli. Due to urbanization, as I said, these dances which were performed at festivals and ceremonies are in danger of disappearing. Bamboo mat weaving, a craft that has been handed down through the areas, is also very well known. However, the crafts are losing ground to machine-made goods, endangering the livelihood of craftspeople. I have said in my earlier lecture, nowadays handmade embroidery or handmade crafts are gradually declining because of a huge demand for handmade items. There have come machines which are actually producing, you can say, these crafts in, you can say, and they are actually the machine made crafts. So, the handmade art is actually dying out and the machine made art is taking its place. Why? Because of huge demand for it. You go to any house nowadays, right, preferably in upper class houses, we can say, and in any handloom fairs or handicraft fairs, you will see people are flocking to buy traditional arts and crafts. Okay. For example, the Madhuban painting has actually, we can say, flourished a lot. Even the Worli painting has flourished a lot. But these are actually taking place of the previously indigenous handmade artisans. It is taking their work actually. The machines are replacing humans, and for that reason some of the folk arts or the handicrafts are dying out and the people are getting out of livelihood. They are having no livelihood because the only work they knew was this art, right, this craft which has been passed through generations, and they have learned only that throughout their life, and the moment they are out of work, they are in search of what they will do next. So, as I said, we have the pros and cons of urbanization and globalization. Some are going throughout the world, some are becoming diminished in both ways. Now, the traditional crafts including weaving, ceramics and fishing have declined in Daman and Diu, which have a strong Portuguese past. These ancient customs have been lost as a result of the younger generation's migration in search of better prospects. Maharashtra is home to folk customs like Tamasha and Lavani. However, the prevalence of Bollywood and other contemporary entertainment channels is posing a threat to this traditional creative art. Youth involvement in Goan culturally significant festivals like Shigmo and Shaojao is on the decline. These colorful decorations are becoming less common due to urbanization and the appeal of contemporary lives. The shifting consumer taste are also causing the pottery abilities of the Kumbhar community and the brassware workmanship of the Bicholim to deteriorate. There are issues with Rajasthan's folk customs too, the Kalbelia dances, the Manganiyars and the Langas. These art forms are in decline due to in part of the apathy and the attraction of metropolitan life. Because of mass manufacturing and shifting consumer preferences, traditional crafts including tiny paintings, blue ceramics and block printing are losing market share. As I pointed out, it is becoming difficult for the artisans who have learned this through generations to make a living presently. Now, I will be talking about the deterioration in central India. The migration and the deterioration of ancient customs are some of the factors contributing to the demise of folk culture in Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. These cultures continue to face major obstacles in spite of efforts to preserve them. I have previously pointed out the Matki dance, which is a traditional folk dance performed at festivals and weddings in the Malwa area of Madhya Pradesh and is going gradually in the danger of extinct. Artist Swati Ukhale regrets that the popularity of contemporary entertainment forms has caused the dance, which is characterized by rhythmic body motions without props, to wane. In a similar vein, it is uncommon to see the Gond Thatiya dance, which features unusual instruments like conch shell trumpets. According to Betul performer Arjun Baghare, these kinds of art are not only found at a few festivals and frequently do not have the support of the general audience. Tribal languages like Bhili, Korku and Gondi are vanishing quickly. Up to 70% of Gondi's vocabulary has been borrowed from Chhattisgarhi in places like Mandla and Dindori, which has caused the language to lose its original meaning. Some dialects such as Shaharani and Kolihari have completely been supplanted by regional languages. We also have the erosion of culture. The traditional knowledge of the Gond tribe, including the use of herbal medicine, is disappearing from the Satpura forest of Betul. Important cultural information has been lost as a result of the disruption of these traditions, transmission caused by modern lifestyles and migration for work. Due to migration also, the Baiga tribe is being regarded as a particularly vulnerable tribal group and is facing cultural delusion. The traditional customs and social structures have changed as a result of interactions with outsiders and exposure to urban lives. Tribal areas, are being forced to adopt mainstream religious traditions, which raises worries. As I told you in the context of Northeast India, that the advent of Christianity has contributed in the dying of local traditions and religions. Similarly, other dominant religious groups are also, you can say in a way, affluent ones are actually influencing the regional and the traditional religion to die out. It is not that one specific religion is doing that, it is the dominance of the majority religion are doing it, the religion followed by the majority. Very importantly, if we know, Raymond Williams, one of the very important Marxists we have, said, in one of his essays about the three types of culture we have: the residual culture, the dominant culture and the other cultures we have, and the emergent culture. So, when we have the dominant culture, it will obviously rule the society, and then the other cultures become the residues. Right? There are some minority ruled culture, and with blend of all these new cultures, that is the emergent culture, also rises. That is what happened in India, be it North India, be it Northeast India, be it Central India, or be it South India or West India. These blending of cultures have given rise to new cultures, resulting in the dying of the traditional previous cultures. According to activists, Hindu deities have been added to tribal sacred sites, and Hindu religious activities are displacing native ceremonies, homogenizing the culture. Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh's folk tradition are at a turning point. Traditional customs are seriously threatened by migration and modernization. Yet there is hope for their resurrection and preservation thanks to community and governmental efforts. To guarantee that these priceless cultural legacies be preserved over time, ongoing awareness and support are crucial. Now, I'll be talking about the barrattry over North India. For a number of social, political, and economic reasons, Northern Indian folk culture has been severely neglected in recent decades. Traditional music, dancing, festivals, art, storytelling, and oral tradition have been handed down through the ages and are all included in folk culture. It has frequently been marginalized in favor of more modern or mainstream cultural forms, despite in great diversity. Now, I'll give you two examples, the Swang and the Nautanki. The Swang happened in Haryana and the Nautanki is in Uttar Pradesh. So, village entertainment used to revolve around these old folk theatre styles. So, previously, groups which performed the Swang and the Nautanki were actually, held in high esteem because they were the only source of entertainment for the villagers. But nowadays, they have been displaced and they have been also disregarded in some instances. And their place has been taken by the Bollywood films we have, right? Because we have more, the emergence actually of, high-end multiplexes, cinema halls. So, people are going more in those areas rather than being interested in the folk theatre, the traditional folk theatre. The audiences for these live performances, this Swang and Nautanki, have significantly decreased. Also, the grants and assistance from the government are few, and the lack of integration in curricula in schools or universities have also are the reason we can say for the dwindling of these, as they are considered backward by city dwellers. For instance, we have Bhojpuri, the language in eastern UP and Bihar. We also have the Braj in western UP and the Pahari in Himachal Pradesh. Although many of these languages preserve rich oral traditions such as folk songs, proverbs and tales, they are currently being supplanted in the media and in schools by standardized Hindi or English. There aren't many publications in these dialects presently, and they are seldom seen in popular TV shows or films because they are felt to be, very backward. Also, we have certain prejudices also. Okay, we have the tendency, that the regional songs or you can say the regional movies actually, okay, they are less of credibility than the Hindi movies because one language is actually dominating the other languages. So, anything of that language, the culture, the practices is being held in high esteem, whereas the regional aspects are actually being deemed socially backward and they are being thought to be, also culturally degrading. For example, the deception we have, in Bhangra and Giddha in Punjab. In Bollywood popular culture, these dances have been highly commercialized, frequently losing their original cultural significance and rural origins. Also, the original circumstances such as agricultural celebrations and seasonal festivals are being disregarded. Folk musicians are either underpaid or underappreciated. Also, the paintings of Madhubani, Chikankari and Kangra have become more well known. Mass-produced knockoffs and limited access to direct markets make it difficult for many local craftspeople. Similarly, the artists are paid less than the middleman and there are limited venues for rural artists to exhibit or sell their work. Even we have, the disconnection with village-based cultural traditions which has resulted from the migration of many rural communities to cities in quest of employment. In metropolitan environment, folk music, stories and traditions are not perpetuated. The lack of documentation, pressures from modernization, insufficient government programs and changing value systems are the main causes of northern India's folk culture's neglect. Although certain state agencies and non-government organizations make an effort to maintain these customs, these initiatives are frequently dispersed and little funded. Now, we come to the end of the first lecture of the 12th module. And here I have tried, or you can say attempted, to explain you that we should actually value our folk culture. Only we, the mass, the people, can contribute in the revival of the folk culture and bring back its lost glory. Thank you and see you in my other lectures.